Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. We are turning to chapter 12. We finished chapter 11 about discussion of the middle. I've spent so much time recently writing. I have an article up there that's getting rejected all the time about chapter 11 because you have to treat chapter 11 and then 12 and 13 goes together. 12 and 13 really are going to be, I want to treat 12 today and tomorrow will be 13, which continues the question of what is most advantageous for cities. And again, this is everyone argues this is the polity argument. Aristotle believes polity is the best regime for best practice for cities. No, it's about how to, in other words, looking at the concern of what type of regime is best for a city is tied to the question of what is best for them individually. And it is not a one size fit all argument. The best practical regime, in one sense, ideally, is regime. Yeah. Polity, regime, but this is really a democracy ultimately. It is that first democracy in the first book of chapter. Uh, um, it is the simple democracy, but this is not going to be likely after a long time because that's going to be cities going to become too much different. The differentiation they're going to grow. They're going to become different differentiation. There's going to be this, and there's going to be a situation where there's going to be contest between the many and the few, and particularly the wealthy and the poor, and then therefore you need to moderate it, right? And that's the nature of all political life. This is why preservation of regimes is a much more difficult thing than establishing them, because things grow, things change, things happen, and this is what leads us to this questionnaire: what regime is advantageous for what city, and what sort for which sort of persons is to be treated next after what has been spoken of. So now we're going to be dealing with what's not only what regime is advantageous for cities, but also what kind of regime is suitable for what type of people. Right? This is going to be dealing with now. This is like this. All right. Now the same thing must be first be grasped about all of them generally. So therefore, yes, okay. You have to grasp. There's a thing that all this is true about all regimes generally, right? The part of the city that wants the regime to continue must be superior to the part not wanting this. The part of the city that wants the regime to continue must be superior to the part not wanting this. If the superior does not want, in other words, if the majority of the people, the part of the city that wants a different regime, if they are bigger and they're more powerful majority, they're the ones who are more, what he says here, a superior. By superior, this means not only mean number, but also power. Every city is made up of both quality and quantity. Every city is quantity, quality, and quantity. So there's two characteristics. He says every city is composed of these two things. I mean, by quality, I mean freedom, wealth, education, and good birth. By quantity, the preeminence of belonging to to the multitude. Okay, this is that one few many. Before it was one few many. Now the quantitative is that the preeminence belonging to the multitude. Who is the multitude? Who is the multitude that's ruling? It is possible that while quantity belongs to one part of the city, among all those of which the city is constituted, and quantity to the other part. For example, the ignoble may be more in number than those of good family, or the poor than the wealthy. In other words, there's more poor than the wealthy. The larger part is nevertheless not preeminent in quantity to the same extent that it falls short in quality. Okay, ready. This is a very interesting argument. Now he says two things, right? Let's see. It is possible that where quantity belongs to one part of the city, among all of those of which the city is constituted, and quantity to another part. He says, he gives examples. The larger part is nevertheless not preeminent in quantity to the same extent that it falls short in quality. So therefore, the question of number is in other words, the quality is there, right? And the quality is those are good. In other words, again, this is that weird thing. The quality is the question of freedom. So freedom means whether they're free or unfree, wealthy or poor, educated or uneducated, good birth or base, range. So the quantity part, right, is how big you are. Multitude. Who's the multitude? So if the multitude is a situation where they have no freedom, no wealth, no education, and lousy birth, that negatively impacts their size question. There's an equation here. So if we say A equals two we said quality, quantity. A has four possible sub-variables. That is freedom, and that's two categories. Freedom opposite, wealth opposite, education opposite, good birth opposite. Right? And the relationship is that this quantity is multiplied by quantity. Or how can I say this? Let's read this. The larger part is nevertheless not preeminent in quality to the same extent that it falls short in quantity. So therefore, its impact. In other words, this is multiplied. In other words, it reduces it. This will be reduced by this way it falls short. So if it falls short of each one of these, all four, in other words, the one that falls short on all four is the, not as powerful as the one that does not fall short on all four. So the one that does not fall short on all four, then the question is, which is of these things, which one is more important to lose? In other words, are all these four things equal? No, not necessarily. So therefore, this is one argument. There's a ranking of five, right? But then there's the other ranking of each one of those. There's a ranking of the four negatives that you get one. You have four different ones of each four. So this, it's everyone. It's only one where they have no four. So therefore, you get the range here. It's interesting. You have a scale. You have one case where freedom is missing, or wealth is missing, education is missing, good birth is missing. Okay, and they have all the other four, the other three. Then they have two missing. So they're missing freedom, wealth, freedom, education, good birth, or wealth, education, wealth, 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 good birth. So freedom, wealth, freedom, education, freedom, good birth, wealth, education, wealth, good birth, education, freedom, educated from freedom, and that's it. Everything else forward goes. Every possibility has ever happened, right? No, it's actually worse than that. It's two, right? I don't have I don't have two, so therefore, hold on. Let's do this. Let's do the math here. So I have no freedom, no wealth, no freedom, freedom, education, freedom, good birth. Then I have wealth, we had wealth, freedom, so wealth, education, or wealth, good birth. Okay, that's the we have to do the mathematics of it, and then uh, 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 wealth, freedom, education, wealth, education, good birth, freedom, wealth, good birth, freedom, education, right? And then all four. Okay, that's the range, right? This is the range of that, and that therefore we have this is this. We have to decide which is worse. We don't know again of those quarterly, which one is more powerful, and that would rate the rate and the rate, right? So that's the range of harmonies in that sense. If it's on a if it's on a continuous scale. If they're all equal, then it's not on a continuous scale. It's right. There's um, uh, having one is the having none are no negatives is the best. Having one negative doesn't matter which one. Having two negatives second next. Negative three negatives, and then a four is the worst. Right. That's the least powerful. That will impact negatively decrease the importance of the magnitude of here. Okay, this is that this is kind of an equation here in that sense. Suggesting here to the extent that it falls short in quantity. Hence, two factors must be judged in relation to one another. So, in other words, these factors must be judged in relation. Where the multitude is poor, most of the poor is preeminent, therefore, with respect to the proportion mentioned. There is a democracy that is in accord with nature, and each kind of democracy according to the preeminence belonging to each sort of people. For example, if the multitude of farmers predominates, it will be the first sort of democracy. If that of workers and wage earners, the last sort. And similarly for the others between these. But where the element of the well-off and the notable predominates in quantity to the greater extent that it falls short in quantity, here there it is oligarchy that accords with nature, and in a similar manner, each of its kind according to the preeminence belonging to the oligarchic multitude. So therefore, what is according with democracy? Democracy is poor. So therefore, of that poor, which one is of the type of poor, which is the least poor, right? That is the multitude. For if the multitude as a farmer predominates, it will be the first toward democracy, that of the workers. But where the last element of the well-off and the notables predominate in quality, to the extent that it falls short in quantity, that's the kind of oligarchy. And in similarly manner, each of its kind according to the preeminence belonging to the oligarchic multitude, or the more oligarchic I want to become, right? The legislature should always add those of the middling sort to the dominant element of the regime. So it's about blending here, really. Again, this whole thing here is about blending. In other words, you need to look at that of this regime, of this. If the predominant power is this one, people are the predominant power. But if the wealthy are the predominant power, then we have to look at the nature of the regime, and they have to balance it towards the thing, right? Legislatures should add those of the middling element to the dominant element of the regime. If he enacts oligarchic laws, he ought to aim at the middling sort. If democratic ones, he ought to attach these to them. The middling sort has to be attached to the dominant part to kind of moderate it in that sense, right? Where the multitude of the middling persons predominate over either over both of the extremes together or over one alone, there a lasting regime is capable of existing. So I disagree with here. He argues 50. Here in the rest of the chapter, polity is frequently taken to be used in the generic terms of regime rather than the specific sense of polity. Although although I think wrongly, consider particularly in reference to the polities, which seem to the intent of A6 and 7. I disagree. I think he's wrong. Again, I think he's been wrong constantly here by translating it one way or the other, because I think that this he's imposing an interpretation on the text that may not be that. That may be misreading. And I think 51 is polity is frequently taken here in generic sense, but in reference back to this, I'm going to continue this. I'm going to go back here. 50, right? A lasting regime is capable of existing. I think the other are. It makes more sense if you say lasting regime than Politude, because he means all regimes here. This is about all regimes because all regimes are mixed. For there, because it's about all. Again, this is not about one regime. It's about what are advantageous for the best of all regimes, and every regimes in particular. That thing. So it's not going to be a one size fits all. What is true is that there's quantity and quality, right? And therefore, we have to look at the regime in question. What is the thing that's both the quality of the thing, the qualities of those who are there, and their part, and that. Okay. In other words, where the multitude of them predominate over both, of the extremes together, or one alone, or worse, their lasting regime is capable of existing. So therefore, the lasting regime. For there is no reason to fear that the wealthy and the poor will come to an agreement against them. Neither will want to be the slaves of the other. And if they seek a regime in which they will have more in common, they will find none other than this. So therefore, this is saying, this is why, this is what happens here. That the middling sort becomes the balancer of the two. Let me go back here for a second. They would not put up with ruling in turn on account of their distrust towards one another. The most trustworthy person everywhere is the arbiter, but the middling person is a sort of. But the middling sort person is a sort of arbiter. So the middling one is the best sort of arbiter here in this sense. This is why it's very interesting here. This is very important to understand the mixing. This is all about mixing. Again, if you understood, this is what's wrong with the translation, and this is what's wrong with this translation and most translations here. By failing to understand, by translating the polity here, politea as polity here, he turns us thinking about what he's saying. He gets us thinking this is a specific regime. But it's not a specific regime. It's about all regimes. This is the nature of all regimes. This is the problem of this is why you don't do this in a translation. You want to understand the wisdom. You have to understand the point in the original language, what he's trying to get at. You need to understand the dual nature of this what is being talked about here, and why it's an awkward. But by him calling it a specific regime, there's something going on here. And why is it called a regime? Is because he said it earlier in his other parts that there was this is how the HS talked about it. Well, that originally what we call regime, he'll say, what we today call regime is what the ancients called democracy. Whoa. So before it became regime, it was democracy. You understand the problem here? That this is why, because why is this the case? This is because our current democracy of the Athenian, of this radical democracy, no longer symbolizes what the old democracy is. So the current situation of the time sees that there's something different in kind, does not want to call this, wants to only call what we have now democracy. He creates a new word. He uses the word that's common with all words to point out, he gives it to all, but this is confusing. Now, this should also remind us that this regime, the rise of political rule is tied to citizens and the role of citizens who share and share. This is something democratic. It had a taste of democracy. So yes, originally it was called the democracy. This is what democracy was understood in the word. The first democracies. The first democracies are first because they were the most simple. This was the beginning of political rule. So there's two first democracies. There's the first democracy of book 4, chapter 4, and there's the democracy in book 4, chapter 6. The farmer democracy, which is the second democracy in the first account 4, chapter 4, and it's the first account in chapter 6 of book 4. So therefore, we have this interesting point here that the middling sort is the arbitrator, right? The better the mixture in the regime, the more lasting it will be. This is why it's better not to call it polity. It's understanding as regime. Makes more sense. Many of those who want to set up an aristocratic regime as well, thoroughly get rid of the bracket there is that again he wants to sell this as polity, so he adds that Lord does and every other translator does. There's no Greek there. The sentence in Greek makes sense in this. Many of those who want to set up aristocratic regimes as well thoroughly err, not only by the fact that they distribute more to the well-off, but also by deceiving the people. It's double side. It's twofold. They distribute more to the well-off. Those who want to create an aristocratic will make error. They err by giving more than they do. They also decide by lying, deceiving the people. For in time, the things falsely and the deceiving. Remember this week, at the end of chapter 4 of book 5, we'll talk about the 3 ways actions and rulers make in the rule. They can it's the famous 3. I can do it through force, fraud, or persuasion, right? So therefore, I lie, fraud. I've lied. I deceived the people. I want aristocratic people. I have the only way I can get it is by deceiving them, so I deceive. But in time, from things falsely good, there must result a true evil. And the aggrandizement of the wealthy are more ruinous to the regime than those of the people. This is why I think Lord and every translator, by translating polity this double way, and discerning that politeia here is about the polity, not the regime, not the common thing, but rather the specific regime. This is about a specific regime. This is not about a specific regime. This is about what regime is best for each. It's not a one-fit-all model. They didn't pay attention, the translators did. They're wrong here. Wrong. And this is why this has to. I'm not good enough to really do the translations. I don't have the. I have. I make corrections. I can read. I have good enough Greek that I can do it. I can follow the text. By reading the text, it was reading the Greek that showed me that the translation didn't make sense. I asked questions. I said, well, why is this word? And the argument they make is, well, but it just makes as much sense if you don't translate it this way. It makes more sense. It makes more sense if you don't translate it. Rule, it would make sense to make a translation odd when it clarifies. But if it doesn't clarify, and this clarifies it better, this explains the situation, because it will lead us to the next chapter, 13, which is about, well, the different things about the devices that are needed to balance things. This is all about balancing. But wait a minute. The balancing is the mixed regime, and therefore that's the polity. Polity is mixed regime. Duh. Aren't you that? You're too stupid. Don't you? What the fuck is the politeia called politeia? At first, in book 3, there was the armed element, but the armed element was every regime. The argument, the ones who are capable of having, it's the one who's capable of having every arms. But that was originally called democracy. Citizens of this. Let's be serious here and understand what's going on. I think I gave a good argument why he's doing this. He needs the opinion of everyone at this time. He's writing at this is that this democracy here, everyone. This is the problem. This mass democracy. He admits it's not good. It's bad. This last democracy. This is bad. This is, by the way, the definition of democracy that Plato defines as democracy. He wants to say, no, that's not the case. He wants to argue democracy is tied to the people, and the people aren't incapable of ruling beautifully. In fact, he thinks Aristotle sides with the many against the few. This is what he shares with this is what he shares with Machiavelli. Machiavelli, again, the famous line of Machiavelli's Prince, that the claim of the few, the many's, the few, the ambition, the notables, and the few, the great want to do great things. They want ambition. They have ambition. And therefore they need to make the many do the things that they have to use the many to achieve what they do. Their greatness and their ambition and their want. The notables want to do great things, and they will force and compel the many to do this. The many just want to be left alone. And Machiavelli's famous claim in The Prince is that the claim of the many are more just. They just want to be left alone. And Aristotle agrees with this here. And he says right here, this is that line. And from in time, the things falsely good must result in truly evil. And the aggrandizement of the wealthy is more ruinous to a regime than that of the people, the multitude, the plethos. And that is the important aspect. This is why this is about the regime, about all regimes, what is best for, and to understand what is regime that is best for a city, it is tying to looking at their character, their nature, their makeup, and then and balancing them to a degree that they're going to be either declined towards this idea of quantity and quality, this idea of the balance in relationship between quantity is not simply equal to this. There's going to be the question of they're going to be interrelated. This is going to impact that. The specific quality of the multitude will affect that, and the quantity of the ruling element of the oligarchy will affect it and affect its question. And then you aggrandize the wealthy. This is the greatest instability, ruinous. It is more ruinous to a regime than aggrandizing the people. Okay, so that's how we end this chapter. Okay, with that, I stop. I'll go, next thing we'll go to chapter 13. If you like it, uh, share it with a friend, share it in social media. If you didn't like it, you can always say that, like that. Uh, Say why. Otherwise, also, any comments or questions, please put them in the discussion. When I see them, I'll reply. Um, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I like to grow the channel, so please, this is the thing to do. Subscribe, get your friends to subscribe. So again, increase the channel, find people who might be interested in it. I hope more people will join because I want to get monetization, man. So if I can get some money from what, I'm joking, but it's not me money. It's I only get enough money ever to kind of help subsidize the cost of doing this. That's happening. That's why I'm gonna. If you want to help, you can do the subscribe star Patreon. It's not about me making me wealthy or anything. It's just only me paying the cost of this. Now it's costing because of the way YouTube is starting to charge people for space on the system because this is diminishing marginal returns, right? And the size of this is growing. You can help me by through subscribe to our Patreon. You can send me money through YouTube. How you do that? Maybe you have to say find my Google presence, and you can always email me some Google money. I'm joking. No, I'm not. Maybe I'm not joking. Who knows? Please, this is a way that can help. We all need patrons. This is how I can afford to do these things. Or you can, if you want to help me another way, you can buy this book. My other books, you buy this, the money goes to at least. If you buy Amazon, okay, I get less. But if you buy by Lulu, it's like 4 to 5 times more than I would get from Amazon. But I get something from Amazon, not from Amazon, but Lulu will give it to me, publisher. But I will make more if you buy it from Lulu. In other words, the profit that the bookstores get, I will get. um, the publisher is, I can understand that they charge for delivery, so most people prefer Amazon, right? Because it's cheaper. Amazon does. It will send it. It'll often give you free shipping, and if not, but why this? This is not a commentary. It's not interpretation. It is what it says it is. It's a notebook on Aristotle's politics. It's a workbook. It's designed as like a kind of a Cliff's Notes, in the sense that it's designed to kind of. It's not a summary, but it basically gives you as a guide, book by book, chapter by chapter. It goes through offering charts, outlines, themes, highlighting, and helping you work through the text. Again, please, if it's something a student who'd like to do it, please do it. It helps. On that note, that's it for today. I will turn tomorrow, chapter 13. Well, have a good day. Take care and goodbye.